Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Alexey Alexeyev. I'm an adjunct professor at the Department of Classics and Religious Studies, University of Ottawa. Welcome to my presentation. The Serpent and the Cross: Tradition and Innovation in Late Roman Imperial Coinage. One of the most striking examples of ancient numismatic propaganda is the bronze follies of Constantin the Great, depicting a wreathing serpent transfixed by the labarum. It was minted around 327 in Constantinople, the new imperial capital. How common were the ophiographic motifs on Roman imperial coinage during the late Principate and early Dominate? How was the profound religious transformation initiated during the reign of Constantine the Great and proliferated by his successors reflected in the numismatic art of the period? What place did the serpent occupy in the Roman numismatic iconographic repertoire in the post-Constantinian epoch and all the way through to the end of the Dominate? I would like to initiate my overview of the ophiographic tradition in late Roman imperial coinage, starting with the late Principate, and in particular with Valerian, the last Roman emperor whose coins obverses bore serpents. On this bronze coin from Aegea, the emperor is depicted as Asclepius, easily identifiable by his characteristic attribute, the serpent-entwined rod. An entwining serpent on the obverse, with its protruding tongue looking straight to the emperor's face, is a remarkable feature, which will never be seen again on any Roman coinage. Other examples of obverse ophiographic expressions of the period include portrait of Valerian, wearing aegis with rearing serpents and prominent Gorgonian, as well as portraits of Claudius Gothicus and Probus, featuring ophiomorphic aegides. The provincial issues of Gallienus were the last to feature a serpent as the principal device. Asclepius, with his emblematic serpent-entwined rod, is the most popular provincial ophiographic subject of the period. He could be depicted alone or accompanied by his daughter Hygeia, always depicted with a serpent, son Telesphorus, or local deities, for example, Tyche of Pergamon or Artemis Ephesia. Aesculapius' depictions on Roman imperial coinage are generally congruent with the provincial templates, but the variety of coin types is significantly more modest. Sallus feeding a serpent, essentially the ophiographic equivalent of the provincial Hygeia types, is by far the most popular subject. Here are just three representative specimens, issued during the short reign of Emperor Tacitus. Provincial coinage of this era features numerous ophiographic subjects, including deities such as Athena, Apollo, and Demeter, heroes such as Heracles bludgeoning the Hydra of Lerna, or Ladon, the guardian of the golden apples in the garden of Hesperides, and Cadmus, lapidating the Ismenian serpent in the vicinity of the future Thebes. Or objects, such as ritual torches, altars, shrines, sacred betylos, trees, or ophiomorphic caduceus. The last extensive production of coins with serpent depictions took place during the reigns of Valerian and his son, co-ruler and eventual successor Gallienus. After them, the popularity of ophiographic subjects declined considerably. Asclepius, extremely popular during many previous decades, completely disappears from the coinage after the reign of Aurelian. Sallus will preserve her prominent place through to the end of the period. During the early Dominate, Sallust continues to be the most popular ophiographic subject. The labors of Hercules experience a resurgence, as well as the depictions of ophiomorphic monsters. Emperor Diocletian, whose cognomen was Jovius, meaning of or belonging to Jupiter, issued a series of aurae depicting the king of the gods fulminating a serpent-legged giant. Sallust feeding a serpent was depicted on the coinages of numerous rulers of the period. The heroic deeds of Hercules found their way onto the coinages of Galerius, the killing of Hera's serpents, and Maximian, very appropriately nicknamed Herculius, the second and the 11th labor. Maximinus Daia was portrayed on the obverses of Bilon Numi of Antioch, wearing a breastplate decorated with a serpent-haired Gorgonian, and carrying a shield featuring a depiction of two cavalrymen with undulating dragon standards. Here is a close-up of one of these remarkable coins. The dragon standard-carrying cavalrymen dominate the group of subjugated captive barbarians. The use of dragon standards in the Roman army was well-established practice by the early 4th century. We know that from the literary sources. For example, from the testimonies of Ammianus Marcellinus in his history, Prudentius in the Crowns of Martyrdom, Claudius Claudianus in the Against Rufinus and panegyric on the 3rd consulship of the Emperor Honorius, the unknown creator or creators of the Historia Augusta, the two Gallieni, and Sidonius Apollinaris, panegyrics on Anthemius and Majorian. The Romans appropriated this military device from their perennial Eastern military adversaries, the Parthians and Sarmatians. The dragon standard is also well documented in the archaeological material. Here is one of its earliest depictions in a martial context, on the Colonna Traiana in Rome. It is carried by an advancing Dacian foot soldier, accompanied by 3 apocalyptically looking Sarmatian cavalrymen, dressed head to toe and head to hoof in scale armor. The dragon standard appears in the battle scene involving Marcomanni and against Sarmatians from the late 2nd century Portonaccio sarcophagus, as well as on the mid-3rd century Ludovisi battle sarcophagus, in a depiction of a battle against Goths. This relief from the east face of the Arch of Constantine depicts the Ingressus, the Constantine's victorious army entering Rome after the triumph over rival Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in October 312. The cavalry is advancing under 2 large, undulating dragon standards. This scene had probably served as an inspiration for Raphael's junior colleagues, who decorated the Hall of Constantine at the Palazzo Apostolico in the Vatican. In particular, the Vision of the Cross fresco, depicting the celestial portent, a shining cross accompanied by the motto, "In this sign you shall conquer," juxtaposed with the large, hyper-realistic dragon standard. A vivid depiction of this legendary event is related to us by Eusebius in his Vita Constantini. As we know, over the centuries, at least 2 notable Constantinian incidents occurred at different locations at different times, were agglomerated in the popular imagination into one. In the pre-Constantinian era, the serpent was one of the most prominent subjects on Roman coinage. The number of numismatic iconographic subjects associated with the serpent is estimated at around 200. The vast majority of ophiographic expressions appear on the coin's reverses, with the notable exception of types featuring portraits of aegis-wearing emperors. The dramatic reduction in the variety of repertoire occurs after Valerian and Gallienus. The extremely popular Asclepius, with his serpent and wine rod, completely disappears from coins after Aurelian and Carausius. Serpent-feeding Sallust preserves her prominence through to the end of the period. The aphiomorphic monsters, such as the serpent-like giants and Hydra, re-emerge. Starting with the rule of Constantine the Great and his heirs, the Roman imperial numismatic iconographic repertoire experienced a steady transformation. During this period, new symbols, eventually universally recognized as distinctly Christian, such as the Chi-Rho or Christogram, Tau-Rho, monogrammatic cross or staurogram, iota chi monogram, and the cross proper, were gradually introduced and steadily proliferated by the issuing authorities. On this rare silver medallion from Ticinum, Constantine the Great is portrayed wearing a helmet decorated with the Chi-Rho. This is a close-up of this remarkable specimen, issued for the emperor's decinalia. During the Constantinian dynasty, only 3 emperors placed serpents on their coins. The first was Constantine the Great, with the follis depicting a labarum transfixing a writhing serpent. The overall composition of this type follows the traditional military triumph convention and symbolizes the ultimate victory over the evil enemy. The Chi-Rho symbolically represents the protective powers of Christ. 3 medallions on the banner, Emperor Constantine, and most likely his 2 eldest surviving sons and future successors, Constantine, became Kaiser in 317, and Constantius, Kaiser in 324. Of course, Crispus, the eldest of Constantine's sons, was executed in 326, and the youngest, Constans, will be appointed Kaiser only in 333. The serpent represents Constantine's former colleague and later rival Licinius, characterized as an immoral pagan and the enemy of the true religion in the pro-Constantinian propaganda, and at the same time the Satan. This iconographic exegesis is supported substantially by the literary evidence. In Vita, Eusebius traces the origins of the labarum to the Constantinian vision of the cross-shaped heavenly portent, followed by the instructional dream. He also provides a detailed description of the device, including a cruciform design scheme, the Chi-Rho on top, and a banner with portraits of Constantine and his sons. Prudentius vividly describes the use of the labarum as an apotropaic device in the military context, including the defeat of Maxentius and capture of Rome. Importantly, Eusebius compares Licinius to a wild beast, twisting snake calling up on itself, and dragon, and calls the labarum a saving trophy and victorious antidote. Further, Eusebius describes the entrance decoration of the imperial palace, commissioned by Constantine the Great. It included the encaustic painting with the image of the Savior sign, most likely the Chi-Rho, and the serpent under the feet of the emperor and his sons, pierced through the middle of the body with a javelin. As the translator notes, this description hints at ritual trampling, calcatio coli in Latin or trachelismos in Greek, a motif common in triumphal art and ceremonial, denoting the utter submission of a vanquished enemy. In this and the following fragment, Eusebius firmly places the described pictorial narrative and its symbolic meaning into a biblical context by referring to Isaiah 27:1 with its fleeing and twisting serpent and the dragon that is in the sea. In the Crowns of Martyrdom, Prudentius describes the practice of Roman soldiers exchanging their vexilla and, importantly, dragon standards for insignia with Christian symbols. And in the Daily Round, he refers to the triumphant cross as the symbol of the Passion and the ultimate victory over death, caused by the fall of man, orchestrated by the wicked serpent, a clear reference to Genesis 3:1-7. The second Constantinian emperor who placed the serpent on his coin was Constantius II. On the reverse of this splendid gold multiple, minted in Milan, the mounted emperor is depicted galloping over a swirling serpent, very likely representing the defeated usurper Magnentius. A possible connection to Genesis 49:17, with its snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, is an intriguing exegetic prospect requiring a further, more extensive historical and hermeneutic investigation. The third was Julian. We know about 3 ophiographic vota publica types, including this depiction of serpent-tailed Isis and Serapis, holding a vase with a serpent emerging from it. Julian's approach demonstrates a traditionally pagan, that is to say, a much more balanced attitude toward reptiles. Now I will describe the process by which new Christian symbols were introduced to Roman imperial coinage. I will focus on the 3 most prominent symbols, the Chi-Rho, Tau-Rho, and cross. The custom of decorating shields with the Chi-Rho, related to us by the contemporary writers, is displayed in the coin portraiture of Crispus and Constantius II. Constantius II and Magnentius were the first rulers whose coins featured a Christian symbol, in this case a Christogram, flanked by the Alpha and Omega, as a primary subject, and not as a dependent component of a larger composition. The popular types of the period include the emperor holding a Chi-Rho banner, sometimes accompanied by crowning victory, sometimes holding statuettes of Phoenix or Victory on a globe, sometimes traveling in a galley, and very often symbolically subjugating the vanquished barbarians. Occasionally, the Chi-Rho was placed on a banner flanked by 2 soldiers, and sometimes it appeared beside military standards, as in the case of a unique silver of Constance from Rome, with a depiction of the Alpha and Omega. Sometimes it served as a mint mark, as in the cases of the fallen horsemen or victory types. The second most popular symbol was the Tau-Rho. Generally, it appeared in iconographic contexts in a way similar to the Chi-Rho, for example on the banners held by the advancing or subjugating emperor. Interestingly, the Tau-Rho and not the Chi-Rho was the sign that appeared in the Constantinian vision, according to Lactantius's earliest testimony on the celebrated incident from the De Mortibus Persecutorum. The cross was still a rarity and appeared only on the coins of Antioch. Its iconographic treatment generally followed conventions similar to those of the Christogram and Staurogram, that is, being placed on the banners held by the advancing or subjugating emperor. The main trends in the new Christian symbols proliferation on the period's coinage include the following. The Chi-Rho is by far the most popular symbol, with a wide variety of types. The cross and staurogram are in distant second and third places. The serpent becomes an extreme rarity and appears only on 5 types, 4 of which are represented only by unique specimens. During the Valentinianic and Theodosian dynasties, the Christogram remains a prominent subject, but the flanking alpha and omega are abandoned. The cross becomes as prominent as the Chi-Rho and is treated similarly by being placed inside the celebratory wreath. Emperors Arcadius and Honorius made the inclusion of Christian symbols into obverse designs a common practice. Here are 3 examples of the cross, staurogram and Christogram placed on the emperor's shield and cuirass. Honorius introduced this innovative type, depicting the triumphant emperor being crowned by the Manus Dei, holding a Tau-Rho staff and trampling a serpent-tailed lion. This iconographic expression is usually interpreted as a visual reference to Psalm 91:13. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. And possibly the concordant Ezekiel 32:2. You consider yourself a lion among the nations, but you are like a dragon in the seas. Emilienne de Mougeot, in her magisterial study in the Revue Numismatique, elaborated upon the Augustinian politico-theological symbolism articulated in the sermons and expositions. In her exegesis, she argued convincingly that the lion represents the external enemies of the empire, meaning the barbarians, or material evil, and the serpent represents the internal enemies of the church, meaning the heretics, or spiritual evil. Interestingly, in the Biblia Vulgata, Jerome follows the Septuaginta tradition of extending the original Hebrew bestiary by adding the highly creative interpretations, basilisk and dragon. The symbolic trampling is a recurring theme in both the Hebrew Bible and New Testament, as demonstrated by these passages from Psalm 8, 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, and Hebrews. Psalm 91 was a quite popular artistic subject in late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. Here are some spectacular examples of works in different media. This late 5th century terracotta oil lamp from North Africa depicts Nimbate Christ flanked by 2 angels, holding a long cross and trampling a serpent and a lion. This famous mosaic from the Archbishop's Chapel in Ravenna depicts the triumphant Christ in Roman military outfit, carrying a cross and a book, and stepping upon the necks of a lion and a serpent. The iconography of this Carolingian ivory carving from Limburg follows the Septuaginta Jeromean bestiary inventory, with 4 distinct figures, including the basilisk. The classical 4-beast scheme is vividly represented on this ivory book cover from the Bodleian Libraries in Oxford. It was made in Aachen during the reign of Charlemagne. On this Anglo-Saxon manuscript illumination, also from the Bodleian Libraries, Christ trampling a pair of beasts and putting the cross-tipped spear through the lion's mouth. Christ trampling a pair of beasts is featured on this late Anglo-Saxon ivory crozier from the British Museum's collections. And last but not least, the Cosmatesque marble relief from the base of the papal cathedra in the Basilica San Giovanni in Laterano, It features all 4 psalmic beasts, neatly labeled with the appropriate names: Aspis, Leo, Draco, and Basilisco. Speaking of thrones, the spectacular gold solidus of Theodosius II demonstrates that by the early 5th century the cross became a common iconographic component of both obverses and reverses. These 3 solidi of the period, from Aquileia and Constantinople, depict Theodosius II and young Valentinian III holding cruciform scepters. This extremely rare gold coin from the Mint of Rome features the same pair of emperors, but now the sovereigns are holding long crosses and are accompanied by an anthropocephalic serpent swirling on the ground between them. Early in his reign, Valentinian III introduced this fascinating coin type of the triumphant emperor holding a statuette of crowning victory on a globe and a long cross, and trampling a human-headed serpent, in this case probably symbolically representing usurper Johannes. This coin type will become very popular among Valentinian's Eastern and Western colleagues, such as Marcian, Petronius Maximus, Majorian, Libius Severus, Anthemius, and Leo I. After that, the serpent, even in its adulterated manifestations, such as the ophiomorphic composite monsters, completely disappears from European coinage for a very long time. Coins of Glycerius represent a gradual phasing out process, where the overall triumphal iconographic scheme is preserved, but the serpent is substituted by a less spectacular footstool, possibly a visual reference to Psalm 110, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool," along with the numerous follow-up New Testament references from Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, and Hebrews. The Justinian dynasty emperors continued to bolster the use of Christian symbols. The cross becomes a common feature on both sides of the coin, like on this solidus of Justinian the Great, depicting the emperor holding a ceremonial globus cruciger on the obverse, and Victory, looking more and more like an androgynous angel, also holding a globus cruciger and a long cross on the reverse. On this solidus of Tiberius II Constantin, the emperor wears the cross-tipped crown and holds a globus cruciger on the obverse, while on the reverse, the image of glorious Calvary cross potent sends urbi et orbi the unambiguous message of the ultimate victory of Christendom. The serpent was a popular subject on Roman coinage until the time after Valerian and Gallienus. The Constantinian type of labarum and serpent defines a symbolic watershed within the long and rich tradition of Roman pagan numismatic Ophiography, with its multifaceted, polyvalent, and discriminating approach to artistic representation of serpents, and the newly established Christian iconographic idiom, characterized by a radically negative attitude. The serpent re-emerges in the 400s, but only in its composite manifestations, always in a defeated position and dominated by Christian symbols such as the cross or staurogram. Eventually, 9 centuries later, the serpent returns to European coinage. And does it ever return with a bang? Just look at this splendid Trecento gold ducat issued under Galeazzo II. It prominently features the Biscione, also known as Vipera, a heraldic charge of the House of Visconti, later adopted by the House of Sforza and the Duchy of Milan. The silver cecino of Gian Galeazzo Visconti, with the large serpent and the prominent cross, can serve as a powerful visual expression of the eventual, after such a long time, reconciliation of these two antagonistic symbols, at least on the coin. As a visual epilogue for this paper, I would like to display two Bohemian silver specimens from the time of the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I. On the first one, the crucifixion and the brazen serpent of Moses present a clear consolidated iconographic reference to Numbers 21:6-9. Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it upon a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live. And John 3:14. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. The second one, featuring Adam, Eve, and the crafty serpent in the Garden of Eden of Genesis 3:1-7, reminds us how it all started with the numismatic evidence and biblical interpretation. Thank you.